Driving a car while only being able to see through the bottom half of the windshield, well, that has obvious disadvantages. You would only be able to see the pavement directly in front of you. You wouldn't be able to see what's up ahead, the next turn, the next curve in the road. You certainly wouldn't be able to see the danger lurking around the next corner. In other words, driving requires seeing more than what's directly in front of you. And leadership works the same way. Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name is Johnny, and if you're looking for a place where faith intersects with leadership and encouragement, then you're in the right spot, because that's what we study here. This is the third episode in our ongoing series, Servant Leadership 101. In episode 1, we covered the definition of leadership, the one that we'll be using throughout this series, and that is leadership is the ability to influence others towards a goal. And I want you to take note, it does not say that leadership comes from your position or your title or even your authority. It comes from influence. And I also explained that having leadership abilities or being a leader, it's a destination. And servant leadership is our chosen vehicle to get us there. In episode 2, we popped the hood of our servant leadership vehicle to see what moves it forward. In other words, we looked at the engine, which many scholars often refer to as the 10 characteristics of servant leadership. Like many engines, it's divided into 2 banks of cylinders. Now, we've already explored the left bank of cylinders, the ones that are relational characteristics, the ones that determine how we treat people. And if you'll remember, the 5 cylinders that we learned about were listening, which means I hear you, empathy, which means I understand you, healing, which means I care about you, awareness means I see what's influencing you, and persuasion, which means I want to move you forward through influence and not force or coercion. Now, these characteristics help leaders build trust, loyalty, and healthy relationships. But an engine can't run properly on just one bank of cylinders. It needs both banks to fire together. It needs both sides working. The relational characteristics, they help us treat people well. But leadership also requires something else. It requires the ability to guide people toward the future. So today we're going to look at the other bank of cylinders. And these are the characteristics that help leaders see the road ahead and guide people towards the future. The first cylinder in our visionary bank is conceptualization. In simple terms, that means thinking beyond the present moment, or as I like to say, to dream big. Proverbs 29:18 tells us, where there is no vision, the people perish. Meaning we must be able to see ahead, to visualize, to dream. You see, conceptualization requires having the ability to imagine a future that doesn't yet exist. And visionary leaders, they often see possibilities long before results or before anybody else even thinks about them. Traditional leaders often focus on short-term projects, such as hitting our weekly targets or numbers, or staying under budget, or finishing the project on time. Now, don't get me wrong, those things do matter. But a servant leader also asks questions like, what can we do to always hit production quotas? Or how can I make sure we're always under budget? Or is there something I can do to always come in on time with the project? And furthermore, they go the distance even further by asking questions like, what could this organization become in the future? Where are we heading in the future? How can we build something meaningful and lasting? In other words, servant leaders don't just manage the present, they imagine the future. Imagine 2 contractors building the exact same house. The first contractor shows up every morning thinking about the next task. And today we frame the walls. Tomorrow we install the windows. Next week we hang the drywall. Eventually the house does get finished. But the second contractor, he walks onto the job site every day with a different perspective. He isn't just thinking about framing or drywall. He's picturing the family that's going to live there someday. He's imagining the kids running down the hallway. And he's thinking about the couple sitting on the porch years from now watching the sunset. Now, both contractors are building a house, but only one of them is thinking about the future of what he's building. That's conceptualization. And servant leaders don't just manage what the task in front of them, they imagine what the future could become. Conceptualization is the cylinder that allows leaders to look beyond the present moment. It allows them to imagine what the future could be. But once that cylinder begins firing, another cylinder has to engage as well. Because it's not enough to imagine a future. Leaders also have to understand how their decisions today will influence what happens tomorrow. And that brings us to our next cylinder in our servant leadership engine, and that's foresight. Now, I know none of us can perfectly predict the future, but good leaders understand that every decision creates consequences. If you think about a rock being tossed into a calm lake, the moment the rock hits the water, ripples begin spreading outward. And the closer the ripple is to the point of impact, the stronger the ripples are. And leadership works the same way. Every decision a leader makes creates those ripples. Some happen immediately, others don't show up for weeks or months or sometimes even years. But a leader with foresight always asks, if I make this decision today, what ripple is it going to create tomorrow? Because good leaders don't just react to problems, they anticipate them. And Proverbs 22:3 says, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Foresight helps leaders anticipate those ripples, helps them guide their team effectively through them. Leadership isn't about position, it's about service. It's about choosing to show up, to care deeply, and lead with integrity every day. In the 4-3-4 effect, Modern Strategies for Effective Servant Leadership, I share the principles, stories, and practical tools that have shaped my journey in faith and leadership through servanthood. Order your copy today. Foresight teaches leaderships to anticipate the ripples their decisions will create. But once you understand those ripples, something else becomes clear. Leadership isn't just about making decisions, it's also about taking responsibility for those people whose the decisions affect. And that's where the next cylinder in our servant leadership engine comes into play, and that's stewardship. And stewardship reminds us that leadership is not simply a privilege, it's a responsibility. Servant leaders understand that people are not simply tools to be used for a leader's personal success. Instead, a servant leader understands that leadership is a trust that's been placed in their hands. 1 Peter 4:10 says, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in various forms. Stewardship means leading in a way that benefits the entire group and not just the leader. Suppose a friend lets you borrow his truck for the weekend. Now technically you're driving the truck, but I think you know something important. It's not your truck. And as a result, you treat it differently, don't you? You drive it a little more carefully, you keep it a little cleaner than you would your own. Before you know it, you probably filled it with gas before you return it. Why? Because you understand that you've been entrusted with something that belongs to someone else. Leadership is similar to stewardship in the same way. The people we lead, they're not our possessions. They're people we've been entrusted with to care for and to guide. And that brings us to our next cylinder, committing to the growth of people. Now, stewardship teaches us that leadership is not a privilege, it's a responsibility. And we've been entrusted with the care and guidance of other people. And when that cylinder begins firing, the engine of servant leadership, committing to the growth of people, well, that comes naturally. Because if we're responsible for the people we lead, then we should also be committed to helping them grow. Now, I often compare leaders to parents in that parents don't just raise their children to be children forever, and they raise them to become capable and responsible adults on their own. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13 says, so Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, and the evangelists, the pastors and teachers to equip his people for the work of service, and so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in faith and in knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure and fullness of Christ. Servant leaders do the same thing. They invest time in mentoring, in teaching, encouraging, and developing others, because the success of the people you lead will ultimately reflect your success. A commitment to the growth of people means investing in others so they become stronger. If you've ever watched a coach working with young athletes, you'll notice something. A good coach doesn't just focus on winning the game today. They focus on teaching fundamentals. They correct mistakes. And they encourage improvement. And sometimes that means letting the young players struggle a bit as they learn the sport. Because the goal shouldn't be winning today's game. The goal is to help the athlete become a better player tomorrow. Servant leaders think the same thing about the people they lead, because the success of the people around them become the success of the entire team. Commitment to the growth of people focuses on developing individuals. But when a servant leader consistently invests in people, the results, they don't just stay isolated. And those individuals begin to encourage one another. They begin to support one another, and they start growing together. Remember, Servant leaders don't just build organizations. They build environments where people feel comfortable enough to trust one another and to work together towards a shared purpose or a common goal. In other words, the environment begins to transform. Your workplace becomes something different. It becomes stronger. It becomes a community. Because when people feel connected to each other, something powerful starts to happen. They stop working for themselves and start working for the good of the whole group. There's a big difference between a workplace and a community. In a workplace, someone shows up, they do their job, and they go home. But in a community, they support each other, and they celebrate each other's achievements, and they help someone when someone is struggling. That's community. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25 say, "And let us consider how we may spur one another onward toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but to encourage one another." And I've seen workplaces where employees barely know each other's name. And I've seen other places where teams show up early to help a coworker finish a project. And the difference almost always comes down to leadership. Servant leaders intentionally create environments where people feel connected and where people feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves. They don't just work harder, they care more deeply about the success of the entire group. So now we've covered the visionary bank of our servant leadership engine. And these characteristics determine how servant leaders guide people toward the future. Conceptualization means I see beyond the present. And foresight means I consider the consequences ahead. Stewardship means I treat leadership as a responsibility, not a privilege. And commitment to the growth of people means developing others, while building community means creating a connection, a trust, or shared purpose. And when we put both cylinder banks together, we have a fully tuned engine ready to go in our servant leadership vehicle. Take a couple moments and think about all 10 characteristics together. Take a second and just compare them to your own life or your own leadership style. Do you exhibit any of them? If so, how many? Or, just as importantly, which ones do you struggle with? Now I want you to just take a minute and I want you to mentally rank the 10 characteristics in your own mind. And I want you to think about which ones come natural to you or easiest. Maybe listening is one of your strengths, or maybe you naturally show empathy to others, or maybe you enjoy helping people grow, or you're good at building community. But on the other end of that, maybe there's some at the bottom of your list. Maybe foresight is something that you're still developing, or maybe awareness is an area where you need to grow, or maybe stewardship or persuasion, they just don't come natural to you. We all have areas where we need to grow or where we need to expand our horizons. How'd you do? Is it easier to talk about the ones you like or the ones that come natural to you rather than the ones that are more difficult? And I firmly believe that some of the harshest and hardest observations we can make in life, they're the ones we make about ourselves. And if we're honest, most of us have had thoughts like this at some point. I can be unkind to people. I sometimes judge people unfairly. And I don't really care unless it affects me. I have my own problems to worry about. I'm closed-minded. I wish they would just leave me alone. I'm off the clock and I don't get paid to care right now. These are not really thoughts that a lot of people like to admit they've had. But this list are thoughts that I've had to overcome at some point in time or other. So if we take that list of mentally ranked characteristics and we look at that hard and we look at the bottom of it, we can ask questions like, how can I grow here? How can I become more intentional here? Or how can I strengthen my leadership here? Because the goal isn't perfection. The goal right now is growth. It's unrealistic to think that every one of these characteristics comes easily to all of us. We're individuals. We have different strengths, different gifts, different personalities, different backgrounds. But that doesn't mean we can't grow or improve, and it certainly doesn't mean we can't become better servants as time goes on. Servant leadership is not really about becoming someone else, but it's about allowing God to shape you into someone with a servant's heart. And if you focus on leading with these 10 characteristics and you let them begin working in your life, you're going to find that bit by bit or step by step, you're going to begin to lead people not just with authority, but with humility and compassion and vision and purpose. And when all 10 cylinders begin firing together, servant leadership becomes more than just an idea. It becomes an engine of something that moves people forward. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. Please subscribe to our channel. Turn on all notifications so you can receive our content. And one last thing, please drop me a note in the comments and let me know which characteristic either comes hardest or easiest for you. I'd like to know. And if you're just joining us, this is the third video in our ongoing series, Servant Leadership 101. And you can click here for episode 1, which is where we define leadership and laid the foundation for this whole series. Or you can click right here, which is for episode 2, which is where we explored the visionary bank of cylinders. So take care, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one.